The anime starts with a guy named Uera, who works at a travel agency. He's an introvert living alone with his cat. While his life isn't particularly exciting, he feels genuinely happy whenever he spends time with his cat. At work, Uera notices his colleague, Honjuji, frequently staring at him, which leaves him confused. Since she has been there a year longer than him, he wonders if she might be upset with him for some reason. However, Uera had no idea that Honjuji just wanted to talk to him. Like him, she's also an introvert and is often misunderstood by others, who assume she's angry because she tends to stare at people without realizing it. Honjuji feels it's not worth the effort to explain herself. Even though her life is like this, Honjuji doesn't mind it much at all. By the time she gets home, her stress disappears as she finds joy and relaxation in studying various maps. Uera and Honjuji are both content with their lives. However, one day, Kurikawa, the branch manager, calls a meeting to announce that the company plans to open a branch in Alaska next year. They need to send someone from their office to manage it. Since Alaska is so far away and would mean being separated from family, the company will select someone who is unmarried. Kurikawa then asks if anyone would volunteer, but naturally, no one is eager to go, given how distant it is. Uera raised his hand and told Kurikawa that he couldn't go, no matter what, because he has a cat to take care of. However, Kurikawa responded that this wasn't a valid reason. Later, his co-workers shared their thoughts on the situation, explaining that while traveling to Alaska might be exciting, living there was a different story. Based on what they knew, it would likely take at least 3 or 4 years of working there before returning. One of the co-workers jokingly suggested to another that they should just get married, since the company prefers someone who is single. Uera overheard this and thought that even if he wanted to, he couldn't, since he didn't have any female friends. As he was thinking, Honjuji kept staring at him without saying a word. Honjuji also didn't want to go to Alaska. Not only was it far away, but she had also heard that the mosquitoes there were like monsters. To her, it was a matter of life and death. The next day, after taking his cat to the vet, Uera and Honjuji unexpectedly meet, despite never having spoken before. Uera suddenly gathers up his courage, thanks Honjuji for all her help, and informs her that he plans to quit his job the next day. For him, his cat means everything, and he simply cannot abandon it. Honjuji asks Uera if there's anyone who could look after his cat, like a girlfriend or a family member, but he quickly denies it. As he's about to leave, Honjuji stops him and suggests they get married since she doesn't want to go to Alaska either. Uera thinks it's a wild idea, but after considering it for a moment, he agrees. Honjuji is confident her plan will work. Since neither of them stands out much at work, she doubts anyone will pay too much attention if they announce they're getting married. Her plan is to act as if they're married for a few months, let the situation settle down, and then quietly let things fade, pretending it never happened. Honjuji assures Uera that since it was her idea, he can leave everything to her, and he doesn't need to do a thing. The next day, Honjuji informs Kurikawa about their married. Instead of being suspicious, Kurikawa is overjoyed to hear the news. Afterward, Honjuji and Uera continue working as usual, but when their eyes meet, they can't help but blushing. Later that day, Kurikawa calls Uera, asking him to bring a document to their usual meeting place and to bring Honjuji along. Little did they know, when they arrive, they are surprised to find it's actually a celebration, a surprise party congratulating them on their engagement. Uera starts to worry, fearing they might get exposed if people start asking too many questions. Honjuji then comes up with an idea. She grabs 2 bottles of wine and heads to a room alone, only to return later, visibly drunk. Meanwhile, Uera finds himself surrounded by co-workers bombarding him with questions. Wanting to help him, Honjuji grabs a microphone and starts singing. However, her singing isn't great, and the atmosphere becomes awkward. Despite feeling embarrassed, she continues singing, determined to distract everyone. As he watches her, Uera feels a deep sense of admiration, thinking her actions are truly heroic. On the way home, Honjuji swears she'll never sing again. Suddenly, she trips and falls into Uera's arms. Embarrassed, she quickly apologizes and rushes off. As he watches her leave, Uera starts to regret and wonders why he didn't get up and join her to sing a duet back then. He thinks he's pathetic for letting her do it all alone. Over the weekend, Uera and Honjuji go on a date to come up with a convincing story about how they met. and decided to get married. During the date, Honjuji feels that Uera isn't enjoying himself and feels sorry for being such a boring companion. However, as the date is about to end, Uera suddenly speaks up and offers to help her create their love story together. While riding the Ferris wheel, he asks if she likes Ferris wheels. Honjuji replies that she doesn't particularly like them but has something she wants to do. As Uera looks at her closely, he notices that she has a pleasant scent. Honjuji then takes out a pair of wedding rings and hands one to Uera. Although the rings aren't expensive, she believes they're necessary to make their wedding story more convincing. Uera begins to feel nervous, hesitating to put it on. He thinks that wearing the ring now would make it feel as though they're really getting married. While he's lost in thought, Honjuji calmly slips the ring onto her own finger without hesitation. She then asks Uera to come up with a proposal line for her to write down. Her idea for the story is that they were riding a Ferris wheel, and when it reached the top, Uera proposed to her. Uera thinks it's a romantic idea but struggles to come up with something to say. Honjuji reassures him that she can think of something herself if he can't, but Uera insists on doing it. As he prepares to say, "Will you marry me?" the words suddenly feel heavy. They're right there in his mind, but he can't get them out. To Uera, those words hold great meaning, and he feels they shouldn't be said lightly. He apologizes to Honjuji, admitting he can't think of the right thing to say at the moment but promises to come up with something later. Honjuji smiles and reassures him that it's okay, he can take all the time he needs. She promises to wait as long as it takes. The next day, O'Hara looks at the ring but still can't bring himself to wear it. Meanwhile, Honjoji enjoys her day off by heading to the beach and taking pictures. She feels stifled by parties, crowds, and Ferris wheels. What truly brings her joy are coastlines and collecting maps, stones, and sand. To her, marriage seems so dazzling that the thought of it feels utterly exhausting, even if it is fake. Honjoji then receives a text from her friend asking how she's doing. She pauses for a moment before replying. She thinks to herself that, since it's her day off, she just wants to be left alone. Back to O'Hara, he finally manages to put on the ring and determined to become a good husband for Honjoji. Just then, he receives a call from an unknown number. The caller claims to know that his supposed marriage to Honjoji is a complete lie and threatens to send both him and Honjoji to Alaska. The next day, O'Hara tells Honjoji about the call. He has no idea who the caller might be, and since the voice sounded synthesized, he couldn't even determine their gender. Given the mention of Alaska, Honjoji suspects the caller could be one of their colleagues. While they're talking, Gonda suddenly approaches them and asks if he can visit their house that evening to discuss something. O'Hara finds Gonda's behavior suspicious, as he's never done anything like this before. Still, he has no choice but to agree. Later, O'Hara begs with his cat to behave since some of his co-workers will be visiting. He promises to give it its favorite food and even stop sniffing it. The cat seems to understand and retreats to spend time alone in another room. When Honjoji comes, she begins decorating the apartment to make it look like they truly live together. Just in case, she and O'Hara review the story of how they first met, their favorite foods, and other personal details. Later, when their co-workers arrive, they are shocked to see 3 of them instead of just 1. O'Hara thinks to himself that it's going to be a long night, but Honjoji reassures him, telling him to just do as they practiced. O'Hara then asks Gonda what he wants to discuss. Gonda becomes serious, bows to O'Hara, and begs him to teach him how to get a girlfriend, saying he also wants to get married. This surprises O'Hara, as he wasn't expecting that at all. Honjoji then brings out the food with a smile, which is unusual for her co-workers. They assume she must be filled with happiness. O'Hara doesn't get it why his co-worker is so happy for his marriage. To him, he hasn't changed. While it's true that he's married, he doesn't think it's all that great. He feels all he did was put on a ring, and that's it. His co-workers look at him and assume he's just being sarcastic. Later, when O'Hara and Gonda are alone, Gonda confesses that he's actually interested in Komiya and asks for O'Hara's support. After the co-workers leave, Honjoji and O'Hara sigh, agreeing that they should never host again. She admits she feels the same way he does. She doesn't understand why everyone is making such a big deal about her marriage. After all, it's not like it's their marriage. O'Hara reflects that maybe, to others, they seem to be glowing. Honjoji, however, believes that only those who can see that light are the ones who end up getting married. She doubts she will, thinking that's just the kind of life she's destined for. But O'Hara disagrees. He tells her he has a feeling she can see the light even without getting married. He explains how, when he comes home from work and watches TV with his cat, he feels like he's glowing in those peaceful moments. He then asks Honjoji if she has anything similar. Excited, she shares that looking at maps when she gets home makes her really happy. Realizing she's standing too close, she blushes, takes a step back, and quickly says it's time for her to leave. Although O'Hara and Honjoji are beginning to develop feelings for each other, they both keep reminding themselves not to get the wrong idea. The next day, while Honjoji is at work, a customer comes in. Since no one at the counter is available, Honjoji decides to assist him, even though it's not part of her job. To her surprise, the customer turns out to be O'Hara's father. He explains that he came because he heard his son is getting married and asks Honjoji if she knows anything about it. Honjoji wonders where he got that information and tells him she doesn't know anything about it. Before leaving, the old man gives Honjoji one of his company's products and asks her not to tell his son that he was here. Honjoji quickly goes to look for O'Hara, but he isn't in the office since it's his day off. She decides to leave the product on his desk and rushes after O'Hara's dad to explain that they aren't really getting married. Fortunately, O'Hara's dad hasn't left yet. He's still lingering, muttering to himself about how his son is bringing shame to the family. Honjoji interrupts him and explains that O'Hara is currently out. She offers to call him and suggests they wait at a nearby coffee shop. Honjoji asks O'Hara's dad what he meant when he said O'Hara was bringing shame to the family. O'Hara's dad becomes serious and explains that marriage is a significant event requiring extensive preparation, including traditional items like ceremonial dolls. He goes on to detail the many things needed for a wedding. Since they live in the countryside of Osso, there are specific local customs to follow. For example, weddings involve inviting neighbors and co-workers, meaning there will be a large number of guests. They also need to book a hot spring resort, as the celebrations last all day and continue late into the night. The festivities include dancing and, finally, a tradition where the bride is tossed into the air. Honjoji is shocked to hear this. Since O'Hara is his eldest son, his dad wants his wedding to be properly done, or their family will lose face. Meanwhile, O'Hara reads Honjoji's text and is surprised to learn that his dad is with her. If you come this far, please consider liking and subscribing for more videos like this. Thank